The phrase, the courage to be disliked, comes from a book inspired by the psychology of Alfred Adler. I'll touch on some of the differences and surprising similarities between his ideas and mine. But what you'll hear in this video is mostly my worldview on what it truly means to live with that kind of courage. Because this isn't about rebellion, it isn't about not caring what people think, it's about the quiet, often painful strength to be fully yourself. Even when it risks rejection, it's about telling the truth, your truth, even when approval is no longer guaranteed. Now, to the one who's spent their life trying to be liked, let me ask you something. What part of yourself have you been hiding just to keep the peace? What truth have you silenced just to be accepted? Many people live behind a version of themselves they've learned to present, the one that fits in, smiles when expected, nods when uncertain, the one that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable, except maybe quietly themselves. But the longer you wear that version, the more distant you become from who you really are. I believe this is one of the great inner tensions of life, the desire to belong versus the courage to be disliked. And in this video, I want to talk to you about that courage, not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that whispers, "This is who I am, and I'm done hiding." So if you've ever felt torn between being accepted and being authentic, this message is for you. Now, before we begin, let me ask you this. Have you ever been disliked for simply being yourself? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let's begin by honoring where this idea comes from. The courage to be disliked, as framed by Alfred Adler, is deeply rooted in his view of social life. He believed that most of our psychological suffering arises from how we relate to others, from our desire to be seen, from our fear of being left behind. For Adler, the solution was social. Choose meaning over approval, choose contribution over validation, and above all, have the courage to live your truth, even if others reject you for it. I agree with much of this, but I began my work in a different place. Where Adler focused on our need to belong, I focused on the deeper need to become. I believed that the human journey is not only about healing social wounds, but about individuation, the process of becoming your whole authentic self. You could say Adler asked, "How do I live well with others?" And I asked, "How do I live truthfully with myself?" Both are important, but here's the difference. Adler often pointed outward, toward society, contribution, and interpersonal courage. I pointed inward, toward dreams, symbols, and the confrontation with the shadow. So when I speak of the courage to be disliked, I do not mean standing up to others in defiance. I mean standing up to your own illusions, your masks, your fears, your personas, and choosing wholeness over acceptance. For Adler, the ultimate goal was community feeling. For me, it was psychological integration. And that kind of courage, the quiet, internal kind, can be far more difficult because it means becoming who you truly are, even when you don't yet know who that is. Why do we fear being disliked? It's easy to say, "I don't care what people think," but most people who say that do. And deep down, there's a reason. When you were young, you learned, often without words, that love could be taken away. That approval was conditional. That being too loud, too quiet, too different, or too emotional might cost you connection. And so a strategy formed. Be what they want, say what they like, become acceptable. But here's the truth. This fear is not weakness, it's survival. In the early stages of life, being disliked could mean exclusion. And exclusion, in the mind of a child, can feel like death. So the mind adapts. It silences parts of you. It builds a mask. This is how the fear begins. And it doesn't simply go away with age. You may grow older, more independent, even successful, but the fear often lingers beneath the surface because at its core, the fear of being disliked is not about ego. It's about loss, loss of connection, loss of love, loss of belonging. And yet, here lies the paradox. In order to belong to yourself, you may have to risk not belonging to others. In order to be truly seen, you must be willing to be misunderstood. In my work, I saw this fear in many forms: anxiety, people-pleasing, perfectionism, even chronic guilt. But beneath them all was one question: will I still be loved if I show who I really am? And unless you confront that question, not with intellect, but with experience, it will quietly shape your entire life. So I'll ask you now, what part of yourself do you still hide just to be liked? And more importantly, what might it cost you to keep hiding it? Let me tell you something that may sound strange. The version of you that most people know might not be the real you at all. It might be your persona, the mask you wear to fit in. Now, I don't say this with judgment. In fact, the persona is necessary. It helps us navigate society. It allows us to play roles: student, teacher, friend, leader. It's how we function in the world. Without it, we'd be overwhelmed. But here's the problem. Most people forget it's a mask. They confuse the role with the soul. They become the persona and lose touch with the deeper self behind it. The persona smiles when it doesn't want to. It agrees when it disagrees. It stays quiet to keep the peace. And over time, this pretending becomes exhausting. You may find yourself wondering, why do I feel so unknown even around people I love? Or why do I feel lonely even when I'm never alone? It's because the persona, by its nature, is designed to be liked, not known. And the more you rely on it, the more distant you become from your true self. The tragedy is not that we wear masks. The tragedy is that we forget we're wearing them. So ask yourself, what mask have you worn for so long you've started to believe it's your face? And more importantly, who might you become if you took it off? If the persona is the face you show the world, the shadow is everything you hide to protect that face. Anger, neediness, jealousy, creativity, desire, authenticity. Yes, even your light can live in the shadow if it doesn't fit the image you've been trying to maintain. You see, the shadow isn't just the bad in you, it's the rejected in you. It's what you've been told is too much, too little, or too different. So you push it down, out of sight, out of awareness. But what you hide doesn't disappear. It leaks out in projection, in resentment, in sudden outbursts, in quiet anxiety. And worst of all, it keeps you from ever being fully whole. Most people think the key to being liked is to become more polished, more agreeable, more refined. But real self-worth isn't found in perfection, it's found in integration. To make peace with your shadow is to say, even this part of me belongs. The goal is not to get rid of your darkness. The goal is to befriend it, because until you accept the parts of yourself you once disowned, you'll keep depending on the approval of others to feel okay. And the person who depends on approval will never be free. So I'll ask you gently, what part of yourself have you banished into the dark just to be liked? Pause for a moment and really sit with that. There comes a moment, not always loud, but always life-altering, when the desire to be real becomes stronger than the desire to be liked. This moment marks the beginning of what I called individuation. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not about becoming better, smarter, or more successful. It is about becoming whole, reclaiming all the parts of you you've abandoned, disowned, or forgotten. It is the process of moving from who you think you should be to who you truly are. And it requires great courage, because to become your true self, you must confront the false self you've been living through. You must face the persona and say, thank you for protecting me, but I no longer need to hide. you must turn toward your shadow and say, "You are not my enemy. You are my missing pieces." And perhaps hardest of all, you must learn to walk alone for a while until you find the people who recognize the real you. This path is not easy. There will be days when you feel more lost than found, moments when you long to go back to fitting in, to pleasing, to pretending. But hear this: to be disliked for who you truly are is still more honorable than being loved for who you're not. Because only when you stop performing can you begin to live. And this, I believe, is the real meaning of the courage to be disliked. Not defiance, not rebellion, but the quiet strength to say, "This is who I am, and even if it costs me approval, I will not abandon myself again." At some point in your life, you may have felt this haunting question rise inside you: why am I so different? Maybe you noticed things others didn't. Maybe you felt emotions more deeply than seemed normal. Or maybe you simply couldn't follow the path everyone else walked, no matter how hard you tried. And for much of your life, you may have seen this difference as a burden, as something to fix, to hide, to shrink. But let me offer you another possibility. What if your difference is not your weakness, but your doorway? You see, most people are shaped by the world around them, but some are shaped by the world within them. They are guided not by rules, but by symbols, not by popularity, but by inner knowing. And those who live this way, they often struggle, because society doesn't easily make space for the ones who don't conform. But there is a strength in you that conformity could never give, because in your difference lies your originality, your vision, your voice, your truth. And truth by nature is not always popular. You may lose some people along the way, but what you gain, authenticity, peace, alignment, is worth far more than surface level approval. So instead of asking, "Why am I so different?" ask, "What gift does my difference hold?" Because the moment you stop apologizing for who you are is the moment you begin to live with real strength. Courage is not something you wake up with one day. It's something you practice quietly, consistently, often in moments no one else sees. So what does it look like to practice the courage to be disliked? It begins with small, honest choices, saying no when you've always said yes, pausing before you explain yourself, allowing silence to stretch instead of filling it with apology, telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. And perhaps most importantly, letting someone misunderstand you without rushing to fix it. You see, many people confuse being kind with being liked, but the two are not the same. You can be kind and still disappoint someone. You can be respectful and still disagree. You can be compassionate and still choose yourself. This is the courage we must build. The courage to stand on solid ground within while waves of opinion crash around you. Because when you stop needing to be liked, you become free to be real. And realness, not perfection, is what brings depth to your life and authenticity to your relationships. So I encourage you to begin with this. The next time you feel the urge to please, ask, "Am I being true to myself right now, or just trying to be accepted?" And if the answer is the latter, let that be your moment of practice. The courage to be disliked is not a final destination. It's a way of living, rooted in self-trust, expressed through action. And every time you choose truth over approval, you strengthen the muscle of your inner self. It sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? That being disliked could somehow be a gift. But if you've ever told the truth and lost someone, if you've ever revealed who you are and been met with silence, if you've ever stopped performing and watched the room grow cold, then you know this truth. Being disliked can hurt, but it can also set you free. Because every time someone rejects the real you, they give you clarity. They reveal where love was conditional. They show you which connections were built on masks. They teach you that peace is not found in pleasing everyone, but in finally pleasing yourself. And in that space, after the noise, after the disappointment, something beautiful begins to grow: self-respect, inner peace, and a deep, quiet belonging to yourself. This is the hidden gift. When you no longer need to be liked, you begin to attract relationships that are rooted in truth, not performance. You become magnetic to the ones who see you clearly, not because you fit their mold, but because you're no longer trying to. And the energy you once spent managing impressions is now free to be used for living. So, if you've been disliked for being real, take heart. You are not failing. You are arriving at the place where your life is no longer dictated by fear, but guided by truth. That, I believe, is one of the great freedoms of the human journey, to finally say, I would rather be disliked for who I am than loved for who I am not, and mean it. So let me return to the question I asked at the beginning. Have you ever been disliked for simply being yourself? If you have, I want you to know something. You're not alone. There are others walking the same quiet path, others who've stopped performing, others who've chosen truth over approval, even when it costs them. And that's what this space is for. This channel exists to remind you that your sensitivity, your depth, your difference, they are not flaws to fix, but strengths to understand. So if this message spoke to something deep in you, something that's often misunderstood by the outside world, consider joining me here. Leave a comment, share your story. Let someone else know they're not the only one.